Good evening and welcome to Greater Somerville for September 18th, 2012. I'm Cayenne Anderson. Over the past several months, innovative cuisine has showered the streets of Boston as Mayor Menino has rolled out a citywide food truck ordinance that permanently began in July of 2011. As the Somerville Board of Aldermen prepared for a vote for the food truck initiative in the upcoming weeks, we here at Greater Somerville felt this was a worthwhile and worthy cause to have a timely discussion of both the critical vantage points as well as the positive aspects of the food truck ordinance in Somerville. And our guests tonight are two women who are very connected to this issue. My first guest, Rebekah Gewirtz, has been Somerville's Ward 6 Alderman since 2005. As the chairperson of the Legislative Matters Committee, she helped author the Somerville food truck ordinance that we will be talking about this evening. In addition to these efforts, she also chairs the Environmental and Energy Committee and is a member of the Housing and Community Development, Information Technology, and the Public Health and Safety Committees. Passionate about community development and effective leadership, Rebekah found her way into politics after founding the Progressive Democrats of Somerville in 2002, a grassroots organization working to elect progressive leaders to state and local offices. A native from Providence, Rhode Island, she has been actively involved in the Somerville community since arriving in 2001, where she calls Davis Square neighborhood home. Our second guest, Christine Liu, is currently the online managing editor of America's Test Kitchen. And she is also a freelance writer on lifestyle, food, drink, and small business. She put the local mobile vending industry on the map by spearheading the Boston Food Truck Festival in 2010, and her passion for good food and community have led to many opportunities, including her work at Urban Spoon, City Search, and Dig Publishing. Her writings on local food, drink, and fashion have been featured in a variety of publications such as the Boston Globe, the Daily Candy Boston, and Boston Magazine, where her recent article, Somerville Food Frenzy, detailed the Somerville Food Truck Initiative and gave an in-depth look into the conversation we will be having this evening. An active Somerville resident and foodie since 2009, Christine currently calls the Ward 2 Union Square neighborhood her home. Please welcome me and to joining them on Greater Somerville tonight, our guests, Rebekah Gewirtz and Christina Liu. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, here we are, callers. As you see, there's a number on the bottom of the screen if you'd like to call, 617-628-9876. If you have any questions for our guests tonight, what I recommend is that you go ahead and let us talk for a little bit so that we can kind of get into it, and feel free to give us a call. Christine has agreed to man or woman the phones, I should say. So anyway, I appreciate that. So here we are. Joe's off tonight. He was supposed to go to the foodie crawl, but that got delayed or postponed, which is unfortunate.
It is.
Yeah, he was bragging last night that he didn't have to come in tonight. I told him you Rebekah, would be hurt. But anyway.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, well.
He was talking about it so much.
Yeah, right? He's just a talker, that show. Yeah, whatever. So let's talk about the food truck ordinance for a minute. Viewers at home maybe not aware of where we stand, what the status is. Maybe you can refresh us on that.
Sure. So the food truck ordinance was first filed at the beginning of the year, I want to say, and it was in response to a truck that had been parked up near Tufts that had only had a state permit but didn't have a permit from the city, and that's because there is no permit available for mobile food vendors at the current moment. So what people do is they either get a hawker and peddler license, which doesn't quite apply, or all they get is the state license, and then they can park anywhere in the city that they want, and it's unregulated.
It's like $65 or some cheap. It's very cheap.
It's very cheap from the state, to get this permit from the state. So what we thought was, well, it's very important for us to have some oversight over what's happening on the city streets. Mm-hmm. That's why the Board of Aldermen is elected, to make sure that what's going on the city streets is to the advantage of neighbors, residents, businesses, the entire community. So we set off to craft this ordinance to make it so food trucks could flourish here, and at the same time there would be some rules about how they would work. But importantly, and I think this is an important point, there would be a fee associated with getting this permit from the city that would help the city to offset the cost of the inspectors that we need to have that go around and monitor these.
Make sure the food is safe.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which is required anyway, but as it stands right now, we don't have a revenue stream at all to provide those inspectors. So there's a lot of different advantages to going forward and doing an ordinance.
Okay, so as far as the ordinance, because I attended the public meeting a while ago, and it was definitely, it was mixed. I think there were a lot of businesses that wanted to see it happen, but they wanted it more regulated in a way that I think this ordinance is going to hopefully help, so that you're not going to, I think the biggest concern was, how is this going to affect the brick and mortar businesses, and how is this going to make them and the foot traffic, which is already, challenging at times to get people on the streets buying food, how is that going to get them to, these establishments, is that going to hurt them or help them? And I don't know. Christine, you're an expert on the
Do you remember when that meeting was? Like 3 months ago, maybe?
I think it was a couple of months ago, yes.
I mean, and then in the meantime, there was that whole Boston snafu with the feud between Phantom Gourmet and basically the food truck headed by Staff Meal Truck. They were kind of the main spokespeople on the food truck side, but the Phantom Gourmet people are like, we represent the restaurant association, whatnot, and we need trucks to be X amount of meters away from any brick and mortar restaurants in Boston. And then someone did like the map and the math, and like it's impossible. There's like no way to be 1,000 feet or whatever the arbitrary thing was. So I think that the conversation is even broader than just Somerville in terms of that direct competition.
Well, what I would argue on that point actually is that these food trucks could bring people in. They're an attraction. People want to come and be in places where there's all different types of cuisine. So no, I wouldn't argue for a pizza truck in front of Mike's in Davis Square. In fact, I would oppose that. And that's part of why this ordinance is so important. As it stands right now, without an ordinance, somebody can get a permit from the state and park their pizza truck in front of Mike's.
And what we're trying to... Oh, go ahead.
No, we don't have control over that. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we're monitoring this and making sure that the trucks that are entering our city squares are doing so in a way that they can be in beneficial places, both to them. Because most food trucks don't want to come to places where it's already saturated with what they're trying to offer.
No, this is true.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense.
And we want to bring people in.
Is there a call? Is it blinking?
No, it is.
Wow, I must be just envisioning that. If you want to call it, no, I'm just kidding. Well, no, and I think that was the point that was made. I think that an initial response to the ordinance was, we don't want. It was kind of more on the negative side. I think it's fair to say, and I think our show tonight is more to discuss positives and negatives, not just the positives. But one of the things that was said, and I think you said this very strongly in your opening, is that if we don't regulate it, it's going to come anyway. So it's kind of like, what can we do to really make sure it is everything that, it seems like Boston has been really thriving. I mean, Kristen, you'd speak more to that, but I mean, what are some of the things that, Somerville can do, and having that open line of communication between the people that established that initiative to really make sure that Somerville's follows suit, I guess.
Well, just being an observer of the food truck scene and totally being on the gossip, I think some lessons I think that Boston has learned along the way just by observing. One, clusters really work. Like, you don't go, I mean, if there's a fabulous food truck that sells everything under the sun and you go there all the time, that's great. But usually you don't want to just eat a cupcake or a pickle or a grilled cheese sandwich. I mean, if you want to, that's totally cool.
Everybody likes fried dough. Kind of, sort of, not really.
But, there's such a camaraderie, and all the trucks like totally tweet each other like, we gotta have, our brothers and sisters here and like come, get your stuff here and there. So isolating the trucks is like not a good idea.
Okay, keeping them clustered.
Two, putting them in a place where people are walking, making them accessible. It doesn't make sense to put a truck where you'd have to hike and not be available for residents or people who work nearby. I mean, even in the sense of like, okay, we don't want it to compete, it doesn't help anyone.
But I actually heard an article on WGBH there was an article or a quick clip, and it basically said that everyone's criticism about them taking away from the food traffic, it generated more food traffic, and if placed properly, people that are going into restaurants, certain restaurants want to have an experience, whereas people that are on the go, that you just want to grab a sandwich. Sometimes just grabbing a sandwich is just what you want. So, I mean...
And it's a totally different experience. I mean, you wait in line, you talk to the person, you kind of crack jokes. If it's a beautiful day, you kind of camp out and have a picnic. If it's a horrible day, you commiserate with everyone. And I think the idea of brick and mortar and a food truck have totally different challenges and totally different benefits, for as a business.
So, in the meeting that I'm going to go back to this meeting because we were both there, but there was a discussion about doing a pilot program. And I think that what was fascinating about this meeting was that as people discussed it more, it started as, okay, we're going to do it in Union Square. And then all of a sudden, I think as people kind of started thinking about, because a lot of the businesses supported them and were really in favor of these trucks, then it seemed like more and more people were like, well, wait a minute, well, what about Magoon Square? Well, wait a minute, what about, Teal Square? And, and so it just kind of caught on. So do you know, as it stands now, the ordinance that's going to go in for a vote, have you kind of vetted what those pilot programs are or not?
I just have to be quite honest about it. Obviously, but doing a pilot program, we crafted an ordinance that allows...
Which she has right here.
Which I have. Which allows the Board of Aldermen to take into account every possible scenario in terms of the general welfare and convenience of the community when considering an application. So the Board of Aldermen is going to look at every single application.
Yeah.
So what does even a pilot mean? I mean, if we're going to look at every application anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm not here to poo-poo that idea or say that's the worst idea. I mean, and it's fine. And to tell you, quite frankly, that's probably where we're going to end up going with this because that seems to be what the majority of people on the board feel comfortable with. My stipulation, or what's important to me, is that it's certainly not just be Union Square.
Yeah.
That all of or many of the squares throughout the city get the benefit of these trucks and what they bring and the foot traffic they bring. Let's not forget about the foot traffic that benefits the local businesses.
We have a call. So if you want to press that button, just press the button.
Magic.
Hi, you're on Greater Somerville.
Okay, I was told I had to call in with a question.
Sounds like Joe Lynch.
This might be Joe Lynch, but maybe not.
I have a question for your guest tonight.
Okay.
In the city of Boston, who actually issues the permits for the food trucks that travel?
For the food trucks that travel?
for the city of Boston?
Yep.
I don't know that answer, Joe. Does anyone on the panel know? Did you stump the panel?
I mean, I assume the city?
I think the state does. The state has permits that they issue for mobile food vendors, and then cities can also supplement with their own permit that's required. So, unfortunately, I can only speak to Somerville, but
Right, that's my question, though. In the city of Boston, they have the food truck program, and who actually issues the permits for that?
I don't know, Joe. Do you know?
I guess that's the question that I think a lot of people have on their minds, is that if it's an independent kind of oversight, or if it's coming from the Board of Aldermen, or if it's coming from City Hall, that's one of the things that I think any legislation has to consider. And the second question I have is, in terms of these food trucks, your guest had alluded to the fact that trying to regulate so many feet from other businesses, is there also a clause in there that regulates being on public property versus being on private property? And then I'll let you discuss, so I'm off the phone.
That's a good question, Joe. We'll discuss that. Thanks for calling.
okay.
So is that true? Public or private property? Is there within the ordinance?
With respect to private property, we typically don't have too much control over what people do on their own private property.
So I could sell hot dogs on my property?
Probably.
Oh.
Don't.
Another income stream there, folks. That's an idea. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, you actually heard about this big thing that's happening in Foxborough right now, right? Where people who live right near the stadium have been charging people to park on their lawn. And because it's their own private property, they've been able to do that for years and years. And now the local board of selectmen or whatever it is saying, no, you can't do that anymore. And there's this outcry, right? Because people are saying that's my private property, and it's a source of income for people, who have to deal with all the traffic and everything else. So putting that aside, what we're really talking about is in the public way, is anything on streets, on our public streets.
Parking spots.
Exactly.
They could go
parking spots, the in front of Trum Field or any of the field, any of the places that are owned or monitored by the public.
So here's a question, and I don't know whether, Christine, maybe you can answer this or not, but one of the things brought up that I believe maybe that's in here is the discussion of background checks for the people that are applying for these food licenses and doing a Corey check. I'm just going to say this because I can, because it's my show, but I feel that there are restaurants in this area that I walk in, and I'm not going to name them, but to do a background check on those people would be a little interesting of a project. And but that doesn't mean they don't have great food, great burgers, what have you. But and a Corey check. I think Corey checks might be possible on those creepy little ice cream trucks that drive around. I'm going to say it because I've seen a few of them.
Sin in the Clowns.
Yeah, in my neighborhood.
Really scary.
It's kind of, and so I guess what I'm saying is I want public safety and I want kids to be safe, bottom line. However, I do think that to place these types of regulations on individuals and not keeping that consistent with other restaurants in the area, I just think would really impede the kind of this flourishing in Somerville. And I don't know what you think of that. If you want to touch that, you don't have to. But it's, do we regulate too much to the point, like what's that fine line?
I have to say I don't understand it at all. I don't understand why we're trying to get Corey checks from a guy who wants to have a falafel food truck, or have a, sell Chinese food, whatever. Like, why? What? I don't fully understand the rationale.
Do you know it's just an urban legend that people who are in little trucks are?
Did they do that in Boston? Did they do that in Boston? I mean, was there some big?
Know.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's just
it's unfamiliarity. Yeah. I think that may be what it is, and not maybe being totally trusting it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I understand there are people who feel that that's something that's important. So, as the chair of the committee, of course, we'll hear it. We'll take it into account. We'll see if that's something that makes sense. I think we have to be cautious that we're not putting regulations on certain businesses, as you point out, that we're not applying to everybody. And how do you single out certain businesses for these sorts of things? And then I hate the slippery slope argument, but are you heading into a situation where you have to then do it for everybody? And where does it end?
Where does it
stop?
Where does it end?
Where does it stop?
I think one of the interesting things about the food truck industry is that what we talked about. It's got a little hipness to it, but there's a lot of innovation. There are things that people are really hoping that some of these trucks eventually make it their way to a brick and mortar business. So it could be a catalyst to a business starting in Somerville, which I think is an exciting thing. And the fact that there are restaurants that really want to start here really makes me, as a citizen, very excited. But I'm curious. There's a lot of buzz on like the mobile apps, and Christine, you mentioned it earlier about how people are tweeting, like if you want a cluster of trucks, things like that. Like, what are there advantages to the mobile truck industry where you saw in Boston, like say they had certain advantages to the restaurants, and they can be a little bit more. I mean, I think if you rent a spot, you have to stay in that spot. I don't really know how that works.
I think you're licensed for like a specific time and a location, so you're not like a random spot.
So is it for 6 months' time? Do you know? I mean, like I know Clover. I have meetings downtown, and I always see Clover. And I always wanted to try Clover, but I'm always late for my meeting, so I can't. But is that always, they're renting that spot? I mean, is that the primo spot they're licensed to? Do you know?
I believe that the city has like just set locations, and then you enter a lottery or you apply to be at a certain location, and then they have the master schedule, so anyone can look it up.
And you can stay on that schedule for a length of time. I mean, there's someone down at Trum Field. I don't know who that is, but there's that cute little red truck, and they've been down there forever.
Yeah.
And the Assembly Square area, there's one as well.
Yep. They're a real convenience for people.
Yeah.
People love food trucks.
Yeah.
They really add something. we have to be conscientious about the brick and mortar businesses. That's true. But we also really shouldn't be taking something away from people that's a convenience that they like and that helps. I love this point. I think it's so accurate about entrepreneurs who they start off with their first business idea, and this is a way for them to have a test kitchen. You know, this is they set up their truck, and then it works out, and then they can start their own business. And who knows?
Have a truck empire, depending on
a truck empire. Are there truck empires in Boston? Clover? Oh, that's
and
right.
Bon Mi, I think, has multiple trucks, and they're opening a brick and mortar in Kendall.
That's fantastic.
I think
we should be supporting and helping to advance these small local businesses.
Well, I would be curious to see how many of them actually do stick around and become brick and mortar. That'd be interesting to see, because I think, you know, this has now started to catch on, so it'd be interesting. I mean, I would assume we're going to keep record of all the ones that have applied, and I mean, I think they talked about that, and I think this is a smart thing too, to regulate, you know, to see what works. So let me ask you this: as you look at these applications and say, okay, we want falafels in Teal Square, or ice cream in Magoon. I know that was, I'm going to shoot that out to Joe because he wants ice cream in Magoon. But anyway, and then you look and it doesn't maybe work out, or there's complaints or things like that. Will the alderman take note of that and then you review the application, say in a year from now after the pilot program is over? I mean, how do you plan on doing that and saying, well, you know what, maybe that ice cream truck in Magoon isn't the best idea because I don't know what the reasons might be, but will there be a review of these things?
That's the value of having a permit, is that it can be given and it can be taken away. You know, I think if it's...
I like that.
If it's
Lady of power.
If it's something that doesn't work for the community, if there are a lot of complaints, if it's unsanitary, if there's, you know, any number of problems or issues, the Board of Aldermen, through the language that we crafted here, can evaluate based on those things and make that kind of determination.
So as far as, I know we've talked a lot about the positives and we've touched a little bit on the negatives, but what do you think, I mean, of the arguments that you've heard, whether it be Board of Aldermen or in your experience in the foodie gossip arena, like what do you think are the valid concerns that the food truck initiative faces? I mean, is there something that, you know, say, you know, we talked about like the cleanliness. I mean, I will say, I had food about a couple of weeks ago. I had food poisoning, and I will say it was not ideal. Now, I did not get it from a food truck. I'm not going to say where it happened. However, I started to think more and more about that, and I think that's a valid concern. How do you feel about? You talked about regulation, being able to support that financially. Do you think that that's something that we can keep up with? Are people? I mean, I don't know what it's like in Boston. Have they been having issues with it?
I don't think so. I mean, if you think about it, the truck it has a very small product line and a very small channel. And if they screw up, like it's done. Like the bar is so high that they're not going to take any chances for it to be
in terms of safety.
Yeah, or having one get sick, or have like I knew of one truck owner. He like got a ton of meat, and for whatever reason, like the event got delayed or whatever, he couldn't use it and he just had to throw it out because it's like, you know, that's a loss, but he's not going to sell it.
Is there anything, say, like on Yelp? I'm curious if the Yelp component has, you know, for the mobile food trucks.
I mean, there's so many online
Are they on? Yeah.
And mobile sites. Yeah, so if anything goes right, everyone's going to know. If anything goes wrong, everyone's going to know. So I think there's like, you feel like there's such a spotlight on each individual business that I think like no one's going to take any chances.
So you don't think that's an issue? So you don't think overall, not any real issues in terms of, and I'm not trying to like bring it down because we're almost to the end of the show and I want to kind of bring it up, but.
I think it's important. It's important to talk about all the different issues that we could experience going forward with this. I just want to really point out though that as it stands right now, food trucks can come here, and there's no right. That's a good thing, and I think that is a good thing. But what I don't think is a good thing is that there's no regulation whatsoever, and there's no permit fee, so the city isn't collecting any fees. So we have to send out our inspectors to inspect them anyhow because that's required by state law.
So that's money that's just going down the tubes.
Right. So this allows us to be able to collect a little bit of money. We're just thinking about a $240 fee, I think, for these.
240, so it would be 60, so
For the
about
state,
$300.
about $300 total. But it allows us to recoup some cost for sending out inspectors to be able to make sure that they're all in a sanitary state and that nothing is going.
Because they're already
going
doing
wrong.
that.
Right, they're already doing that
So
anyway.
if the money is losing,
Right,
that we're losing the cities.
that, and like I said at the very beginning of the show, I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important that we have an ordinance. And again, I know it looks like we're moving in the direction of a pilot per se.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes.
Okay, we got a couple more minutes here. I've got a few current events to go over, but I guess the long and short of it is I just want you, Christine, to give a little bit of a, why you think the food truck initiative needs to come to Somerville and why. What do you think?
I mean, I feel like the appetite for cool ideas and cool food in Somerville has, come to an all-time high. I'm really excited about it. Feel like there's such a indie and really creative economy here, and to fortify that is awesome. And there's great food here. Another question, just like along the food trucks, like in Boston, there's been fashion trucks or retail trucks, and the city has had to sort of catch up with this permit doesn't exist. So maybe food trucks will lead the way to more mobile, cool small businesses.
That's fantastic. And now, why do people want to get the word out to their aldermen to make sure that they support this ordinance? Why is that important? Because
it's important for the city to be able to have some oversight over what's happening on our city streets, so to the benefit of our community as a whole, our city squares, and our residents. We want to make sure, like I said earlier, that we don't have trucks that are parking in front of stores where they could be to a detriment, or where we have them parking for months and months on end without any oversight by the board. But this is an important thing that we're doing to make sure that we have some local control over what's happening. And I think it's really great how many people have been participating in this process.
Yeah.
We really have had a lot of people who have come and been part of it, so we really appreciate
got to
that.
get the word out.
Yeah.
Okay, couple upcoming events here. We got a couple more minutes. Actually, we just got off the air, but you at home on the blog will see this. The second annual East Broadway Foodie Crawl, the East Broadway Foodie Crawl was postponed, and that will be on the September 25th, 200 Broadway. Buy your tickets now on East Somerville Main Street's website. And King of the Ville, which is a scavenger hunt race throughout the city with cash prizes, is very exciting and put on by Somerville Scout. That's Saturday the 22nd, all day, 9:30 pregame breakfast at Sally O'Brien's, and then 11 o'clock or 10 a.m. onward, Joe Lynch will be advertising that and hosting that. I might make a surprise appearance, we'll see. But at any rate, the King of the Ville scavenger hunt, Holly Banks has worked really hard on that, so everyone turn out for that. And Union Square Farmers Market, always a pleaser. I'd like to thank our guests, Rebekah Gewirtz and Christine Liu, for stopping by Greater Somerville tonight to discuss their views on the food truck initiative that will be coming to Somerville later this year. I would encourage all of you at home to take the time and voice your opinions to your local officials so that they can be well informed before casting their vote. Please check out our website, www.greatersomerville.wordpress.com, for more information on tonight's program, related links, and previous Greater Somerville episodes. And that does it for us tonight. Thank you to the viewers at home for watching. Stay safe and stay informed. Good night, everyone.